Hey, thanks for tuning in to Community Voices, brought to you by Mainline Television Network. I'm AnnaMarie Jones. A lot has happened in a month since my last conversation with Pennsylvania Reps Jennifer O'Mara and Greg Vitali regarding COVID-19 pandemic. They're here with me now via Zoom for an update on local government actions, policies, and procedures as we move forward with the pandemic. Hey, Greg and Jennifer, thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Great to be Zooming in.
Good to see you.
You know, I've never used Zoom up until 7:30 last night. Now this is my third Zoom, and since then, this is exciting.
And I've been on 2 of those.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I've been having a lot of Zoom cocktail parties, so that's been my experience. Well, anyway,
I can use trivia on Zoom.
Oh, see, there are a lot of great uses for it, aren't there? It's keeping us all connected. Yeah. Well, so I know that you guys just got out of a budget meeting, state budget meeting. So what happened, and is there any pertinent information from that meeting that applies to what's going on with the pandemic?
Well, not surprisingly, revenues are down. This was a meeting of the Southeastern delegation, all Democrats in the 5 Philadelphia and the surrounding county area. And the budget director, Ann Bologna, and Matt Bradford, our appropriations chair, kind of gave us the lowdown. Basically, they said the Wolf budget presented in February is kind of out the window because all the revenue sources are down. But there wasn't a clear direction as to precisely where we'd be going on that. Jen, what's your thought there? Do you agree with that, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to start out by saying, to no surprise to none, revenues are down. And because of many of the tax extensions that have been put into place by the Wolf administration to provide relief to taxpayers, we're going to see revenues also come in later throughout the year. So that's going to skew the budget as we work. Typically, the way a normal year would work, the budget address is presented in February, and then we would try to pass a budget by June 30th. This year, I think we can safely assume everything that we know about the budget is out the window, and we are going to be moving as quickly as possible, but also trying to figure out exactly the situation that we're in and how we're going to move out of it. We have to find revenue somewhere. And so we're going back to Harrisburg next week. And I know that we're going to be talking about issues that are going to relate to the budget. So I'm hoping that as the governor lays out his plan for reopening, we also start to take into consideration how that's going to impact our budget. But it's going to be a big budget year this year, I think, in terms of how things are going to move and trying to keep track of all the changes.
So what are some of the programs that will be affected, or can you talk about ones that are important, like schools and the loans that are going to small businesses? Like, where are we on that?
Well, I think it's safe to say everything is being impacted. Every state agency is feeling this. Every department is feeling it in one way or another. So it's across the board. And we're going to try to figure out, I think we have to try to figure out how to prevent there from being winners and losers when we create a recovery. And the recovery has to be equitable. And unfortunately, what this crisis has shown us with our economy is there are already inequities, and this is further driving them. I think we're seeing that with some schools, for example, as they try to move towards virtual learning. So I don't think anyone is safe from how this is going to impact your budget, and we have to figure it out. One thing to mention about the loan programs, the first loan program from the state for small businesses ran out of funds very quickly. And my colleagues, Greg and I, both have signed on to a bipartisan letter with all the elected officials in Delaware County, urging for the Secretary of the Department of Commerce or of Community and Economic Development to bring more money. The second thing is the PPP loans that the federal government was pushing through the SBA is also maxed out now. So we have to wait now for more relief for small business owners from both the federal and the state government. One form of relief is coming in unemployment, though, through the federal government. People who are self-employed and independent contractors now qualify for unemployment, whereas before they did not. And that form, we're expecting it live any day now for people to be able to start applying. So once that comes out, that should be able to provide some relief to people who have still yet to feel any.
And where does that money come from?
The federal government, it was passed already in one of two of the stimulus packages that were passed by the federal government. Pennsylvania pulled down funding. One of the bills that we passed the first week back in Harrisburg allowed us to adjust our unemployment program to pull down funding in both of those federal grants. So the federal government is funding it. The state is administering it. So we have had to wait for federal guidelines to implement the program, and then we had to build the technology to take the application. So that's why there's been a delay between receiving the money and people getting the benefit.
Okay, so that money has not run out. That money is still
no, we're still getting that unemployment. Yep.
And it's important to note, and I'm sure Jen will agree with this, our district offices are really a resource for people who are making unemployment compensation claims. You know, we are working with people who are having problems getting their PIN numbers. We are checking the status of checks. We are keeping the independent contractors informed as to when they can start applying. Our district offices are opened. I would suspect Jen's same as me in that we're not really having personal client contact, but we are working via phone, via email, and so forth to sort of deal with a lot of these claims. That's a major part of the work that both Jen and I are doing now, I would say.
How many calls are you fielding a day for this?
My staff, it depends because I don't know how Greg's office is functioning. I know mine is the phones are being forwarded to my staff, and each one reports receiving about 20 to 30 calls a day. So two of my staffers are answering those phone calls. So that's about 60 calls a day, primarily focused on unemployment. So what we've started doing is we're collecting people's information, and then we're trying to serve as a liaison between them and the Department of Labor and Industry because the phone lines are so busy. So like Greg said, it's a big service that we can help people. And we've been successful at getting through and getting issues resolved and claims sorted out. So if anyone out there is struggling with an unemployment claim, please, if you live in one of our districts, contact us. If not, contact your state representative because they're supposed to be helping and we're supposed to be helping you with that.
Okay, thank you. But what about the businesses, the small businesses who need assistance and those reserves that well has run dry? What do they do going forward?
One of the big battles we're seeing in Harrisburg, and it cuts pretty closely down party lines, ideological lines, and it's interesting the way it does, is the Democrats' focus seems to be following the governor in many regards, not all regards, with regard to public safety, sort of, protecting, flattening the curve, keeping people safe. The pressure we're getting from our Republican colleagues in Harrisburg is the pressure to restart the economy, open business. So you see that in, for example, the bills we worked on last week, Senate Bill 613 and others, and you'll see it again. It's this ideological divide, this different view of the world. So it's really it's really a balance because I think we all recognize certain inequities out there. You see, being able to buy, for example, landscaping supplies in certain big stores and others being forced to close. You see some landscapers out there working. You see a lot of inequities, and that we have to sort of be sensitive to that and continue to fine tune. But at the same time, I think the governor generally is doing a good job in protecting public safety. I mean, as I look at other governmental units throughout the world, no one seems to be criticized for doing too much. No one seems to be criticized for being too protective. The criticism seems to be from not being protective enough. So that's, I think, when we get to Harrisburg next week, we're going to see that battle continue and continue moving forward as this disease works its course.
Yes, and I'd have to agree with you. The governor's doing a very good job. For instance, he just passed an order to provide safety measures to combat COVID-19 for workers. So going into the grocery store and staggering the limitation of people going in and coming into contact. And, it does seem counterintuitive to have these measures go into place. I don't think that that's actually going to be effective until the 19th on Sunday. And then we're talking about economic reentry. So that seems counterintuitive to me. I know that we need the economic stimulus. However, how do we keep everyone safe and from getting reinfected if we're doing both? So is that the fine line that you're talking about, the balancing act?
Right, but interestingly enough, if you live in a poverty area, and we had a state rep on our call today mention the point that some people aren't eating. So there's that also, that the safety factor that comes from not having food too that weighs into it. So it's really sort of complicated, and there's a lot of different perspectives. A lot of different voices, and we don't really have a playbook for what we're doing now. I've been in Harrisburg for 28 years, and I've never encountered this. So we're just sort of kind of feeling our way through, trying to do the right thing.
Jennifer, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say this has been really a balancing act between saving human lives and preserving human livelihood. And there is not a fine, definite answer for either one of those things when you're facing a global pandemic. And we're in an area that's hard hit. And I think where we're also seeing a disconnect in Harrisburg is from legislators who are in districts where their county has as many cases as we may have in my municipality, or their county has as many cases as I have people who have died in my district. Last time I checked, there were 13 residents in my district who passed away from COVID-19. So we need people to understand that we're not standing here saying that we don't support your business, that we don't want to see you open, that we want the economy shut down. We don't want any of those things. We are just recognizing that the medical experts, both in Harrisburg and Washington, D.C., because I participate in the weekly conference calls with the White House every week, and they're saying the same thing. We don't have adequate testing, and we don't have enough data to show that we're in a decline steady enough to reopen everything without costing more lives. Right. And so I also think what I'm trying to also weigh is the sacrifices that workers, including our healthcare workers and first responders, have already made will be for naught if we just open back up like this without listening to the experts and then flood the healthcare system. They're already struggling. We already don't have enough PPE. And so how are we going to make sure essential workers, if everyone's deemed essential, how are we going to protect everyone if we're struggling to protect those who are keeping us going right now? So that's just, it's a really difficult choice, when we're making votes and people are telling us we're voting against their right to operate. It's like, no, I'm trying to save your life. I'm literally trying to save your life. Right. And that's the decisions that we're left to make.
Well, it seems like, this is part of our communal sacrifice to maybe take a financial hit in order to save lives, because the disparity is real for health in those who are not eating, but yet those who still have the potential to get sick. So we do need to do our best to find what that balance will be. And I do agree that we need to be on the other side of this curve before we can even consider reentry.
We just saw a big increase today in cases statewide and in our county. So we had the second most cases in Delaware County today across the state in all 67 counties. So we're not yet seeing a slowdown.
Right. The governor mentioned today in his press conference, we continue to increase, but the rate of increase is slowing. So we're not at the top of the curve, but it kind of appears that we're getting close to the top of the curve, at least if you could infer that from what the governor was saying today.
And one thing I kind of want to ask my colleagues, although I'm not going to Harrisburg because one, we're on our stay-at-home order and we can vote remotely, but also it's fiscally more responsible to stay at home and not cost taxpayer dollars in traveling and being in paying for being in this Capitol building. But the president last night laid out guidelines for reopening and very strict phases and gates that you would need to enter in order to be in each phase. And based on his guidelines, Pennsylvania is not through the gates yet to reopen. So if we're trying to follow the guidance of the federal government, which appeared to be really data driven guidance, and in listening to that, we're not there yet. So it's not easy. And I think Greg and I are both really committed on helping people find ways to eat. Or if you're struggling with paying your bills, like we're trying to educate people on which bills. PUC right now released a whole bunch of information. If you can't pay your utility bills, they're not going to shut them off and they're not charging you late fees. So we're trying to connect people with that sort of information so people can feel a little bit of comfort. I know though
My
it's
next
not easy.
question, actually, what are the programs out there to help people who are suffering? I mean, getting away from opening businesses, but relying on government support. So we know that there are food banks out there that are providing food for people. And what about the mortgage forbearance? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the governor had some information that he rolled out today. It does include some information about if you're unable to pay your mortgages, but there's also now they're going to stop any eviction. So if any tenant is unable to pay their rent, there's also a stop on federal student loan payments. So from March 13th, I believe was the first date through September right now, your federal student loan payments and interest being accrued on them is stopping. You can choose to still make payments if you want. And I think there are other things out there if you qualify for them, but we have to just try to get people in there and applying. One of the big increases though was in unemployment that the federal government passed was an additional $600 per week for anyone on unemployment from April 5th through July 31st. And so, or it might be July, I think it's July 31st, but it could be July 1st. I have to check. Either way, $600 extra that will automatically start coming in addition to your regular unemployment payment. So that's going to help. And then stimulus checks started coming out and people should have started receiving them this week. So those sort of direct resources should be starting to help people feel relief right now when it's getting really tough.
Okay. Well, you mentioned voting before. Well, you voting, but there is an election coming up, a primary, and that's on June 2nd, correct?
Yes.
Right.
I know that Klobuchar is, I don't know if this bill passed or what's going on with it, but it's to make sure that we can vote by ballot and have that the cost of doing so covered.
By mail?
Yeah, by mail. Sorry, by mail. What can you talk more about the election coming up and if we will be voting by mail or is everyone going to have that option?
Well, I kind of have a vested interest in that because I have a contested primary, so I've been following that very closely. One of the things that we are encouraging is the vote by mail option. Just fortuitously, we passed a change to our voting laws, which allow people to vote by mail for any reason whatsoever, just for ease and convenience. So we're encouraging everyone to apply for an absentee ballot as soon as possible and then vote that way to minimize the need to go to the polls on June 2nd. The easiest way to do that is to just get on the website Votes PA, and then you can just by a few keystrokes have apply for the ballot. Then the ballot will be sent to your home or wherever you direct it, and you can vote that way. People who don't want to do it that way can actually request a paper ballot, and we can send it to them. But you can apply um, with a paper application. You can fill in the paper application, send it to your county courthouse, and they in turn will send you the ballot itself. So it's a two-step process. You first apply for the ballot, you get the ballot, and then you vote. So we're encouraging people to vote by mail to avoid the need. I mean, Jen alluded earlier to voting in Harrisburg remotely versus actually going there. I actually go there, and what I'm seeing is that maybe only a third of the legislators are there, no staffers are there, no lobbyists are there, no visitors are there. So actually, when you actually go there, it's kind of a safer environment because not a lot of people are there. And if we can encourage people to vote by mail on June 2nd, it'll be a safer environment at the polls because much less people will need to go there.
Now, I'm just imagining all of these paper ballots coming in. What is that system going to look like for counting those votes? And I'm assuming that it won't be a same day. It won't be the same day in terms of the numbers.
It's supposed to be, ideally. It might take longer to count ballots if we have more of them mailed in. And we do have a lot of people utilizing the mail-in ballot option. I think there was a report that between 2 and 300,000 Pennsylvanians have already requested it. We passed an adjustment to Act 77, which is the election law change that made this new change to our voting mechanism this session, a couple weeks ago, that will allow the canvassing of the ballots to start counting early. So the way that absentee ballots work, and Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong, is they are delivered to the polling place where they would be counted in the morning, and the poll workers actually open and count them. It used to be at night at 8 o'clock after the polls close. They would count them then and include them in the totals that are sent and reported out when they hang up the report outside of each polling place. We changed the rule that they can start counting them earlier in the day. They can start canvassing those ballots earlier in the day. So that way the counting process won't take so much longer at night, because you're right, there are going to be a lot more ballots this year by coming in by mail. So my office is actually, not my office, the caucus is, and they're going to release it by my request, a video to show people how to apply online through the votespa.com process, because there are a couple steps. And also, if anyone does not have access to a printer right now and the libraries aren't open, so you might not be able to print a application to vote by mail, our offices are able to mail those to you. So you just have to give us a call and request one, and we can put one in the mail and make sure you get and that's just the application to apply to receive a ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And switching gears, I wanted to talk a little bit about schools. This is something that is near and dear to me, and I talk to a lot of my friends about what we're experiencing with homeschooling. And we're wondering if, and we don't have a lot of time left to discuss, but what is happening on the state level with schools, and is each township getting the same direction, or is each township on their own with how they're conducting their online school programs?
So when we first closed schools and schools districts started trying to implement virtual learning, you may remember Philadelphia immediately said that they could not do any virtual learning. And that was because they felt that they were not upholding the free and equitable education requirement. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We in Harrisburg passed a law allowing districts to continue virtual learning and requiring them to do their best to meet the FAPE requirement. But now it is a localized decision. So each school district is going to be able to figure out how they can best implement it, and how they can also make sure every student in their district is receiving access to this education. So because of the fact that every student has to be able to utilize this education. It's moving slower than some parents would like, but in order to provide the most equitable education right now, given all the circumstances, that was what we felt was the best move to make at that time. Greg, I don't know if you would like to add anything.
Yes, that's about right.
Okay. Gosh, there's so many more questions I have, but we're running out of time. I wanted to talk to you about isolation and mental health, what our testing might look like going back to school for kids and businesses as well. Like, are we going to be testing people, taking temperatures? Are we going to have enough tests to make sure that people who are asymptomatic aren't spreading this? There's so much I'd like to cover. So will you guys come back and talk to me some more?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Definitely. And I do want to add about mental health. I know that is very difficult right now for people in all sorts of capacities, all sorts of ways. So if you go to either of our websites or Department of Health or Department of Human Services, you'll be able to find there are phone numbers that you can text or call 24/7 to get connected to resources. So I don't want anyone to think just because you're socially distancing does not mean you have to be isolated. There are ways to get help right now.
Well, thank you so much for adding that and getting that in because it's really important. And we'll discuss that more next time we get to talk. So thank you so much, Greg and Jennifer, for joining me today. This has been you
Thanks
guys
for
have
having
all
us.
the
Thank
information.
you for including us.
Yeah, stay safe.
Thank
You
you.
too.
And
Thank
hopefully
you.
we'll
See you
zoom
soon.
in
Take
again
care.
soon.
Absolutely. Take care, guys. Well,
Bye-bye.
thank you for everyone for tuning in. And yeah, check out Jennifer and Greg, well, Jennifer O'Mara and Greg Vitali's pages. Do you want to quickly give everyone your emails? Or I'm sorry, your websites?
www.gregvitali.com.
www.voteomara.com or www.repomara.com. Two different options.
Yeah, thank you so much and have a great day. And everyone, thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.